it's staying for the period of this sensational on the grid now for Formula Adelaide. Here is Craig Denyer with Mark Osler.
Yes, thanks very much, Bill Woods. There's some wonderful history here. Vern Schuppan and Pete Lovely will lead the field in the Lotus 49. Sir Jack Brabham and Dave Livingston in the Ferrari. Row 3, Rick Hall and Malcolm Ricketts, Peter Sims and Robs Lamplow out of 8. Out of 5, John Dimmer and Ian Pugh, Biff Stillwell and Mike Rives will start off the back. Some wonderful, wonderful history here, Craig.
Yes,
and it really has been a salivating time for these old guys walking around the track and saying, gee, I remember seeing those things race.
Well, a cross-section of the finest Formula One cars from more than 30 years ago, and great names too, like BRM, Ferrari, Lotus, Repco, of course, Csworth, Coventry Climax, almost set for a start for this 12-lap race.
And this isn't just a parade, this is real racing, and they get the green light. One of the Lotuses, Vern Schuppan, I think it was, the pole position man, didn't get away cleanly in the Lotus 49B. He's left behind, but he has been the fastest man on the track, and let's see if he can make it back to #1 position after 12 laps.
My, how times change in 30 years. No wings, no aerodynamics, and no slick tyres, treaded tyres, of course, as they are these days in Formula One as well. The cycle goes round, but a tremendous array of all these different cars from the late 60s. In the field, of course, Sir Jack Brabham driving the McLaren, the very, very first McLaren that Bruce McLaren ever built. Even the engine number is 001.
And a wonderful selection of cars as they swing around. That's a gorgeous car, that Ferrari. We've been listening to that all weekend. Magnificent V12 engine. The exhaust headers exiting at the top of the motor, and this beautiful collection of white tailpipes really are a wonderful sight and sound as they thunder around the streets of Adelaide. But leading it, I think, is Pete Lovely in the second of the Lotus Csworths, car number 25.
Yeah, he finished second in the early race today. Schuppan went on to win it. So Jack Brabham came in third. But Schuppan obviously couldn't get the car off the line. No stranger to South Australia, of course. Born in Adelaide was Vern Schuppan, and one of the world's most successful long-distance and endurance sports car drivers, winning Le Mans in 1983 for Porsche.
Well, isn't that a beautiful car? The Lotus 49, a hugely significant car in Formula One history. It was the chassis that Colin Chapman built to take Ford's DFV engine, an engine that was built in cooperation with Csworth Engineering in the UK, and it was a tremendously successful motor.
Rick Hall had engine problems, fuel problems with the car. We'll start from pit lane. Jack Brabham, look at that. Sir Jack, 72 years of age, in the car that Bruce McLaren originally built.
Yes, so running a 3-litre BRM V12 engine. It's actually owned by a fellow by the name of Bruce McGaw. If there's any kart series followers out there, you'll know Bruce McGaw, of course, owns the Pac West champ car team in the States. Very much a racing enthusiast, and he's got this car in his stable. What a wonderful looking machine.
Well, Sir Jack running second behind Peter Lovely. And of course, at 72 years of age, he's still extremely competitive. 3 times world Formula One champion, Australia's first Formula One champion, winning, of course, in '59, driving for the Cooper team when the car actually ran out of fuel on the last lap, and he pushed it over the finish line. Took the championship again in 1960 and again in 1966 in the car of his own design. And of course, the famous Repco Brabham.
Phenomenal effort. People still stand in awe of Jack Brabham for doing that. A guy who not only designed and constructed his own car for the Formula One World Championship, but went on and won the championship in it as well. And a remarkable achievement that hasn't been repeated.
Well, when you look at 126 Grand Prix, pole position 13 times, winning 14, on the podium 31 times. Went to England to pursue his career in 1955, built a car in the Cooper workshop, which he actually brought back to Australia and won the Australian Grand Prix in 1955 at Port Wakefield.
When you talk about historic racing cars, they're pretty historic drivers too. Our statistician Nigel Greenway just pointed out to me. First and second drivers, the first guy leading the race is 73 years of age, and the guy in second 72.
Well, there you go.
Now here's our poleman, Vern Schuppan, one of Australia's most successful international racers. Won the Le Mans 24-hour race for Porsche back in 1983. And he's been very quick here over the weekend, but he had a terrible time, and he's actually bringing into pit lane. That'll probably explain why he couldn't get off the grid properly that time around.
He also won the Tasman Championship in Formula 5000 in 1974. And you may remember he also drove with Alan Moffat in a Falcon at Bathurst and set fastest lap one year. In fact, I think it might have been 1976 or thereabouts. Tremendously
versatile driver, originally from Whyalla in South Australia, and a very distinguished international career. He also raced at Indianapolis, came third one year at Indy. The driver with a tremendous pedigree, but unfortunately this weekend having a little bit of trouble with the Lotus Csworth.
In fact, he was Rookie of the Year in the Indianapolis 500 in 1973, finished third in 1981, and still lives in Indianapolis. Is based in partnership with former Grand Prix driver Stefan Johansson with an Indy Lights team.
So Pete Lovely it is, and he's getting plenty of of heat from Jack Brabham. Sir Jack doing a great job there in second position. Let's check them out. Malcolm Ricketts, Dave Livingston, Rob Slamplump. Back with more on your home of motorsport after this break. Welcome back to the Sensational Adelaide 500. This is the race of legends, the classic Grand Prix cars from the 60s and 70s. We've had a lead change. Pete Lovely in the Lotus 49B was leading this race. He went to the break, but he's been overtaken by this gorgeous-sounding V12 Ferrari.
Absolutely fantastic. Livingston, of course, now taken over from Lovely. Unfortunately, retirement for Sir Jack Brabham, who's out in the McLaren. But a tremendous battle between car 6, the V12 Ferrari of Livingston, car 25, Peter Lovely.
And there is Sir Jack, unfortunately. Went out of the race with some mechanical problems, but it's so typical of this guy. He was such a hands-on engineer and mechanic. He'll be fiddling in there trying to get the car going himself. Amazing guy.
And he's still very competitive. I mean, raced last year at the Nürburgring race, the production car race over there in a VW Beetle of all things, as we go back to this superb car, which was once owned by New Zealander Chris Amon. In fact, Amon drove it in 1969. Was then loaned to the North American racing team for Pedro Rodriguez to drive in the Canadian, US and Mexico Grand Prix.
Well, unfortunately, our pole man was taken out early. Vern Schuppan, he's down in pit lane with Barry.
Yeah, I'm with Vern, Mark. And now what happened, Vern?
Well, they held us on the grid a little bit too long, and the car boiled, switched the engine off, then couldn't get it started. And then all of a sudden, you know, a 5, whatever that was, and I stripped third gear getting off the line.
You still won the first race?
Yeah, well, that was... at least I achieved something, and I didn't have to work very hard in this one.
Great, thanks very much, Vern.
Thanks, great.
Yeah, he's a very nice man, Vern Schuppan. Tremendously successful international racer. One of our greatest ambassadors in motorsport, in fact, but such a quiet, unassuming character. You talk to him, he's just such a gentle, quiet voice, very unassuming, but a wonderful driver. Yes,
in fact, gave Porsche tremendous victory at Le Mans in 1983, but has driven all sorts of race cars in the years, including Formula 1 cars too. So Livingston from Lovely, then Lamplauer and Ricketts, Rives, Sims, Dimmer, Bib Stilwell back there in car number 1 in 8th outright. A beautiful little car. Look at this, a superb little Repco Brabham 2.5 litre car. And it was brought out here for the Tasman Series, actually for Sir Jack Brabham to drive. And of course, the Tasman Series in those days was for the 2.5 litre configuration, whereas Formula 1 was for 3 litres. So Bib, of course, gives away some 500 cc's to those in front of him, but it's a superbly turned out car. He had a huge accident in this about 3 years ago where he tore the car in half, broke his leg, and it's been just painstakingly rebuilt by Don Halpin, who was the original foreman for the Repco engine shop back when they made these race cars back in the 60s. So tremendous pedigree, and I would imagine, Mark, a few dollars tied up in that car too.
Just a tad. In fact, all the cars out here, some of these cars, particularly the H16 BRM on the grid, valued at something like $1 million. The guys who are racing these things are out there having fun, but boy, it's an expensive process if you stick one into a concrete wall around here. And
historic Formula 1 racing is very, very popular worldwide. Particularly the Lotus team have their classic Formula 1 team, which is really a tremendous, I guess, testament to Colin Chapman, who pioneered Lotus, gave it so many World Championship wins. As we see these cars on their final lap of 12 laps for the Strathfield Formula Adelaide race. Oh, off onto the track. One of them well and truly pushing quite hard. And this tremendous array of vehicles from the 60s. Before wings came in, before aerodynamics. A time, Mark, when air was clean and sex was dirty.
Exactly. I was talking to Jack Brabham yesterday, actually. He was saying it's just amazing what a technical race Formula 1 has become now. He's saying drivers change gears with buttons and just about everything's done for them. Back in these days, you had to change gears with your right hand. You really had to conserve the car. And he said it was very much a driver contest there. It's very much now become a very technical contest, particularly in terms of aerodynamics, whereas he said it's very, very difficult in a Formula 1 car now to overtake. Back in these cars, we saw some tremendous slipstreaming duels.
I wonder if a lesson can be learned from history, Mark. You know, they talk about slowing Formula 1 cars down to make more passing opportunities. They've gone back to treaded tyres. One would think that perhaps the day of the aerodynamics have gone just a little too far, and the true art of race car driving is somewhat being lost.
Well, I think the commercial pressures on Formula 1 is where that art has been lost. You know, a lot of the teams are saying they don't want to give up their wings predominantly because it provides them with additional advertising space. which is unfortunate because the racing that these cars produced back in the late 60s were absolutely spellbinding. And a lot of people rue the day when aerodynamics became such a powerful force in Formula One that really does now dominate both design and the quality of the racing.
So Livingston still well and truly in command. Under a bit of pressure, though, from Lovely at 73 years of age, who has been around for a long, long time. He's had 50 successful years in motor racing and is absolutely enjoying his trip to Australia this weekend.
Yeah, it's tremendous stuff. Magnificent V12 engine in the back of that Ferrari. No Formula One event would be complete, indeed, without one of the Scarlet cars, and there's one here this weekend. Look at that engine, that magnificent collection of exhaust pipes on top of the motor. And there's a big challenge down the inside now by Lovely. He got a great run out of that corner. They're going to go side by side down the straight. These guys are really getting stuck into it, getting very, very competitive. And checkered flag's fallen. Shorter race than yesterday. And it looks like Livingston was just in the Ferrari. But a tremendous exhibition for the fans here. A second win for Ferrari in Formula One in Australia this year. We've had it pointed out by Nigel Greenway. Very good point. Of course, Eddie Irvine won the opening round of the FIA World Formula One Championship at Albert Park. And now David Livingston following through in the footsteps of this magnificent Ferrari.
And taking the accolades of the crowd, too, as he goes around. Sir Jack Brabham had suspension problems in the car, so hopefully that's going to be repaired in time. There's 4 races this weekend here at Adelaide, so another 2 to come. And a tremendous demonstration of these fantastic cars from the real glamour time of Formula One, the 60s, where we had such great names as Graham Hill, of course. We've lost so many of these great drivers, Jim Clark, Bruce McLaren, and so on. The list is just endless.
So taking a wave there, Pete Lovely in the Lotus. A great race between the Lotus and the Ferrari. And a great atmosphere at Adelaide as we begin the countdown to the V8s. David Livingston, of course, Pete Lovely in the Lotus in second. Rob Lamplow in the BRM, Malcolm Ricketts, Mike Rives, Peter Sims, John Dimmer and Ian Pugh. Wonderful action amongst the Formula Ones. We'll be back with the V8.